Joining us now, staff writer for The New Yorker, Susan Glasser, chief Washington correspondent at Midas Touch and host of Scott MacFarlane Reports, Scott MacFarlane, and executive editor at The Nation, John Nichols. Scott, think any of them are going to be looking in the mirror and wondering, God, what have we done?
I don't see how this fund survives in its current incarnation based on where we are right now, Katie. The senators are poised to offer amendment after amendment when they get back here next month to gut this thing like a fish, to pull out pieces, to firewall off anybody who hit a cop, to firewall off other people who tried to overturn an election. And I'm not sure where Republicans find 50 votes to stop any of these amendments. They can lose 3 Republicans on these votes. Seems they've already lost Bill Cassidy, Mitch McConnell, and Tom Tillis, who has absolutely coined the best phrase of the week, stupid on stilts. I'm going to get a T-shirt that says that for myself. But there are other Republicans who are poised to join them. I mean, I can't imagine Susan Collins up for a fierce reelection, who's already expressed her concern, is going to be on board. And what about anybody else up for reelection? There are competitive races across the country. Who wants any ownership of this thing right now? It's going to get gutted, and it's going to get gutted as soon as the Senate gets back here. They ran away from town yesterday to avoid this topic. They can't avoid it forever.
Yeah, but listen, well, first off, Scott, you look tall on the camera, and I worry about you wearing a shirt that says stupid on stilts. I'm just going to put that out there. But I'm going to ask you, John, about whether it's too late. I mean, it's Memorial Day weekend. Start of the summer, people start to tune out. Congress is going to go on recess soon, a long recess. And a lot of the drama gets baked in. November is not that far off. So Congress may have left because they don't want to deal with this right now. But you know what? People are going to leave as well. They're tuning out from the news. So even if they go in and fix it, is it going to make the rounds the way that the fund itself has already made the rounds?
Well, and the ballroom is still in play. And there's a whole host of other, let's say you clean up this one. There's another issue awaiting there. And I think the gentleman who was at the start of the segment there, the guy up in, I think, Mike Lawler's district, who was
Jay Breen, yes.
Yeah, who was just simply saying, look, we got a lot of problems here. We should really kind of get back to basics. His definition, if I'm reading right, getting back to basics is, worrying about people, make sure they got health care, that their job's okay, that they can make it in this difficult economic time.
Maybe not have gas at $4.
$5 in some places.
$6
and
even a gallon.
Let me and that's kind of at the heart of this thing. I'm not sure that the specifics of any one of these issues, ballroom, this one, whatever, are as important as the sense that the Republican-controlled Congress just doesn't seem to be able to focus in on the fact that it's kind of hard to get by these days.
I mean, Susan Biden's team learned that you can't fight a feeling, to borrow a phrase. And the feeling back in the end of Biden's term was that the economy was bad and the future looked grim. And Donald Trump came in and said, I'm going to make it better. The feeling now is that Donald Trump, along with the Republican Party, doesn't care.
Well, I mean, it's not just a feeling, by the way. It's an objective reality that when it comes to the prices that Americans pay, whether it's the rate of inflation, which is now higher than inflation was when Donald Trump came into office, whether it is the price of gas, we've already mentioned that. Obviously, not only is it significantly higher than when Trump came into office, headed upwards. I believe he is the president who said that on day one of his presidency, in addition to ending that Ukraine war, which continues, he was going to be bringing down prices in the United States. So, it's a very specific record to run on. I was, sort of had to restrain myself from laughing a little bit there. In one of the quotes from one of the senators, he says, this is really terrible. This is adding to the deficit. This is the least of the things that are adding to the deficit. Donald Trump, Republican Party standard bearer, traditionally Republicans have been the party that has preached fiscal discipline, austerity. They came into office. Elon Musk said
so far from that.
$1 trillion. And in fact, the budget deficit has grown enormously. But the bottom line here is that it's not just some example of misspent government money. Would that it were that. That's bad enough. This is the president of the United States essentially looting the federal government on his own corrupt behalf. And I think we do need to be very clear with people. It's not just a sort of like, oh my, it's a, a policy disagreement we're having. It's hard to conceive of any planet in which any president of any party would have been allowed to get away with this in the past with any makeup of the U.S. Congress. Donald Trump is saying, I demand nearly $2 billion from the U.S. government to give to people who sacked our Capitol. And I do think it's really important not to use his phrasing of this quote unquote weaponization committee and to say to people that it's not just a question of how to spend money, but it's a question of blatantly raiding the U.S. Treasury on Donald Trump's personal behalf. It's shocking.
Scott, Brian Fitzpatrick, Republican, who's running for re-election in Pennsylvania, who, by the way, Donald Trump is not liking right now. He wants more information on this fund. What does he want exactly, and is he going to get some more backers in Congress?
I have some new reporting on this. First of all, I wanted to give you props for invoking REO Speedwagon and Can't Fight This Feeling on a Friday afternoon. Really well done, Katie. Brian Fitzpatrick's teammate on his effort to stop this fund is Tom Suozzi, the Democrat from New York. They had partnered up, one of each, one Democrat, one Republican. And Tom Suozzi says we're going to do the Noah's Ark theory, where we get one of each party to sign on to this legislation to outlaw the fund, to soften the ground for Republicans to feel comfortable to get on board. I'm not sure how many Republicans they can get on that arc, but they don't need many. You saw this on Thursday when just a few Republicans derailed the plan to have an Iran war powers vote because Democrats and just a few Republicans were going to hand the president a defeat. Just a few can defeat the fund.
Just a few. You're right. Susan, let me talk to you about the Democrats. How do they use it? What do they say? You just spoke to Jason Crow about it. What's the idea here?
Well, I mean, it's interesting. Corruption actually is a pretty powerful campaign message. We've seen that in many other countries. I've been particularly interested in the campaign that ultimately ousted Viktor Orban, Hungary's very long-serving leader, in a campaign that focused on something as sort of simple and immediately graspable as the idea that he and his family had grown so wealthy that exotic animals were overrunning an estate owned by his father, including zebras. The zebras became the symbol of the opposition in Hungary. People were bringing zebra stuffed animals to opposition rallies. And ever since then, I've been asking myself, what's the zebra? In American politics, I think a lot of people, the answer has been the ballroom, $1 billion ballroom, especially because Trump personally seems to have fetishized it so much, right? He's literally bringing reporters in to give it a tour, things like that. There is a question, though. Democrats remain very divided among themselves, as we all know to this day, about the proper way to campaign against Donald Trump. Is it enough to oppose him? Do we have to have agreement, which we don't have, on, the kind of the rest of the program or not? But, right now when people are economically struggling and there's this gap that's wider than ever before between the emerging, let's call them the emerging trillionaire class with whom Donald Trump has surrounded himself, building ballrooms and the like, inviting them on his plane to go to China. And then, it seems like the ladder is being pulled up for everybody else in this economy.
Well, what's interesting is that the Times, in their most recent polling, found that among Democrats, there is actually not that much disagreement over where to go on policy and whether the Democratic Party needs to be more progressive or more moderate. Most Democrats feel good with where the party is right now. What they do want, John, is to lean into populist politics.
That's right.
I mean, stuff like that gentleman in the beginning was talking about. Focus on people here, as Susan was just mentioning. Donald Trump has surrounded himself with the billionaire class. Democrats, Democratic voters want them to focus on that. Democratic politicians have not been so good, by and large. There are some exceptions at focusing on the billionaire class.
You're very generous in saying not been so good. If you read the autopsy report, kind of a mess of a report, but if you read what came out, I mean, even there, one of the sub-themes was, boy, maybe we should have talked a little more about economics in 2024.
Yeah.
The Democratic Party has struggled with this for a long time, let's be blunt. They have people who want to raise money from donors who often have interests. Those interests have not usually been on the side of populism, right? On the side of going out and being blunt. And as I go around the country, I've been very, very struck. The Democrats who are rising, who are doing well in races around the country, sometimes outsiders who are pushing aside more established incumbents or more established figures in their states, tend to be criticizing both parties. This is a very interesting dynamic. They will get up in front of a crowd and they will say, the Republicans are doing terrible stuff. There are, so many things that are wrong. And they will say, and the Democrats have been a mess as well. The Democrats have screwed up on these things as well. And that is often as big an applause line as the Republican criticism.
All right. John Nichols, always good to have you. Thanks for showing up in person. Scott MacFarlane, I'm glad you got my REO Speedwagon reference. Usually it's fish around here, but we threw a new one out there, and I appreciate you catching it. Susan, do not go anywhere.